Pope Francis passes. BC may see a tourism boom. China issues warnings. Election 2025. And is the carbon tax gone? All that and more on The Really Big Show. I'm Jim Check with Now Media. On the phone with me, Ian Burns. Sorry, we're off to a late start this morning. We had a little bit of technical difficulties, but here we go, and we're going to get into it. Lots to get through. Beautiful background shot there, traffic flowing in the central Okanagan. How's it looking out there in Ottawa, the nation's capital?
It's windy and cloudy and not very warm right now, so not as nice as Kelowna, unfortunately.
Kelowna is racking up the wins as far as weather goes versus our nation's capital. Racking up the wins. There you go. Pope Francis died at 88. 88 years old. I'm a little tongue-tied. What's going on there? Canadian leaders paying tribute to this morning.
Yeah, they've all been in. Trudeau, Poilievre, Carney. I think it's quite interesting to just to note that Catholicism is the biggest religion in Canada. I think maybe most people know that, but it's quite interesting that Poilievre, Carney, and Trudeau as well are all practicing Catholics, and yet what interests me is that's just never spoken about. It's not really a feature of the political conversation, and yet obviously in the US, that's all they ever seem to talk about at times. But they've all come out and they've all said quite sort of you can usually tell when some like 19-year-old intern has written a statement for a politician, but I think in the case of the Pope, they've all written their own statements and they're all very complimentary to Pope Francis, who, it's easy to forget he's a very controversial figure. He hasn't really done much in the last few years, but overall, throughout his time as pontiff, he's been quite a controversial figure, and many people look at him as a kind of radical, like a almost like a populist pope or something like that. But yeah, the Canadian leadership, at least the Canadian elite, very, very fond and complimentary of Francis.
Yeah, about 25% of the population of Canada is Catholic. According to Stats Canada, about 11 million Canadians are Catholic.
Yeah, and that's really interesting to note, isn't it? When you think that you talk about the conquest of Canada by the British in 1759, the whole like 100 years or more after that was about how can we keep this place as a British colony? Because the British were very ardent Protestants then, when the majority of the people that live there in Quebec are Catholics. So a lot of Canadian history was about how do we sort of maintain this balance between Protestantism and Catholicism. And yet now here we are. And the same is true in the US, by the way. Catholicism is just it's just won the race, at least for adherence, and it is very much the most important religion in Canada in terms of numbers.
And BC might be in line for a bumper tourist season as travelers avoid the United States. I mean, if you look at Kelowna's background, I mean, you can't say why not for sure. Beautiful area.
Well, I would say BC stands to really benefit from that, and also Alberta. Maybe they'll do all right with the Rockies. But I
Yeah,
think BC really stands to benefit because if you think about Canada, the rest of Canada, BC is quite a sort of unique ecology, isn't it? It has a unique system of the rainforests and the beautiful beaches and the sea, loads of wildlife. I mean, it's very attractive, isn't it, for people in the rest of Canada? So I would imagine if you were in somewhere like Manitoba or something like that, or Ontario, and you wanted to have a vacation in Canada, BC's got to be top of the list, really, hasn't it?
yeah, and God knows we have crystal clear lakes, and it's such a beautiful backdrop. And hopefully, we have a beautiful summer like we did last year with less wildfires and that. But yeah, Kelowna in the central Okanagan, all of the central Okanagan is absolutely beautiful, and we're lucky to live here for sure. But like Alberta does have lots of great stuff too in the Rockies and Banff, Lake Louise, and all that. So there you go.
Yeah, it would be lovely to not have to suffer the wildfires again, wouldn't it? But it all depends, Jim, really. Have you been making sure to cut down on your consumption of fossil fuels? Because obviously, as we know, as Jagmeet Singh tells us repeatedly, that has a massive effect on whether or not there are wildfires in Kelowna, whether or not you cut down on your personal use of fossil fuels.
Yeah, I think what they need to do is figure out some of the mitigation issues, and then technology definitely will be part of our solving our problem with mitigation and fast reaction to forest fires. I mean, that is the biggest thing that really helps keep the fire small. Because once they get out of hand, it's very hard to bring them into control.
Yeah, and it's also very hard to protect people's property when their property is surrounded by a dry forest.
I was a youth and working for the Alberta Forest Service when most of northern Alberta was on fire way back in the day, and I drove ranger trucks through the fires. And oh my God, like until you do one of those things, you're driving with fire burning on both sides of you. That's you have to get stuff to the firefighters, and you gotta. I was driving hot shot, so yeah, pretty wild times for a young kid.
It's
New,
terrifying how fast it moves, isn't it? I mean, it
yeah,
goes considerably faster than people can run in some cases, doesn't it?
yeah. Well, it jumps too, and the wind takes it for sure. And then the that fire that I was helping with, it wasn't like you were fighting the fire. You were trying to put in a break in front of it. There was no fighting. When a fire gets that hot, there's no fighting that fire. It is putting a break in front of it to take the fuel away from it when it gets there.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's New Brunswick group hopes to foster pride in basketball's Canadian roots. That is our game. That is our actual game. It's basketball, created by a priest, I believe, way back in the day.
Yeah, wasn't he? He was sort of, he had some sort of Scottish link as well. I don't know if he lived in Scotland or if he was, maybe his parents were Scottish. But then he went to the US, didn't he? He went somewhere in, I really should know this, but somewhere in New England, I think, didn't he? And
Yeah.
that's where he sort of pushed basketball. But he actually was a Canadian, really. You have to say, he was born in Canada anyway. So, but it is true because hockey was played, that was played in England, wasn't it? And
Yeah.
hundreds of years ago. But obviously, Canadians kind of codified hockey. They got the rules down, and like what we understand to be hockey is also really, you have to say
Uh,
that's Canadian. But the one that's like 100% Canadian, I guess, is basketball, isn't it? Created by Canadians.
yeah, it's funny because basketball is a game we created, which the Americans have really taken on and owned. Although we do have the Raptors now, and we had a Vancouver team, I think the Grizzlies, but they've since moved on. But the NHL was our game, but like even that is being taken over by the Americans. If you think about it, we haven't won a Stanley Cup since Nick 1993 or 91, a long time ago. Seems like forever ago that Canada has won a Stanley Cup. China with a warning, saying warning countries making deals with the U.S. Wow, these two big economic powers are definitely, you know, I guess the two bears are fighting, and if you're a mouse, got to look out, right?
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what this is now shaping up to be, isn't it? Between these two like Goliaths. These two silverback gorillas they've chosen now as the moment to fight. And we have to we're being forced to choose between them. I mean, I would say if that's going to happen, there's absolutely no question who we must choose. It must be the United States. But obviously, with some of these other countries like Vietnam, it's a little bit harder. Obviously, Vietnam and China have an enormous ancient rivalry that goes back 2,000 years or more. When you had the likes of the Han Empire and some of the later empires, I think the Ming Empire as well, sort of conquered northern Vietnam and had that as part of their empire. But then also they've got a lot of bad blood in the 20th century as well, a really bad blood, and they've shed blood in battles and wars with each other. So the Vietnamese, you'd think that would be a no-brainer that they would choose the US, but I don't know if you're forced to choose between one or the other. It's pretty hard, isn't it, for Vietnam to say no to China? Like they share a border. They share belief in the Communist Party, though it doesn't really that doesn't create friends apparently. But that's going to be a hard one. And then the likes of the Philippines, Japan, Korea, all those countries that are really close to China, like geographically,
I would say Australia
those are
is
the
in there
ones that'll
too.
be difficult. Yeah, Australia. But I mean, realistically, I say that, but you have to think, don't you? If you're honestly really forced, it has to be the US because the US is the great consumer. The Chinese don't buy enough stuff, and they don't have an open free market, so it's really hard to get stuff in there to sell in the first place.
Yeah, and they're
But
also
even if you do get stuff in there, there's no guarantee you're going to make all that much money. Whereas the US, they have a consumer culture in the US, so you can go there and sell stuff relatively freely and make money. So I feel like, they're gonna
yeah,
people
and
countries are gonna pick America, aren't they?
and then the other big one is that they're aligned militarily with the Russians. So I mean that's a big. They said that there was no what that word they used there. There was no holds barred on that cooperation between Russia and China.
Yeah, relationship without limits or something like that, wasn't it?
Like that, yeah. Let's move on to our election 2025 coverage. That's what everybody wants to talk about for sure. So we got a little intro here to play. Lots happened this weekend. Lots and lots and lots and lots. But advanced polls are open for the last day as the election campaign heads into the final week. So advanced polls are open right now. So this is the last day for the advanced polls. So if you're looking to get out there and make your vote count on the advanced polls or other than that, I think you're going to wait till the big day on April 28th. Yeah, so we're 7
That's
days
right.
away. What's that?
Yeah, that's right. You would have to wait. Yeah, and I would sort of say something to bear in mind, like when they first opened, I think it was Friday, wasn't it, that advanced voting started
Yep,
to be possible.
that's correct.
There were there were enormous lines at some voting places. Like I'm talking like 4 hours,
Yeah.
and that is always possible. That can always happen on actual election day as well. I mean, thankfully, all the times I've voted in my life, I've never encountered a line. But I have to think, like, especially, I mean, I'm like a father of two little children, so and I work full time and all the rest of it. I just don't have 4 hours to stand around, and I know that applies to a lot of people. So if you're in that situation, like, it's a horrible predicament to be in. But if you wait till the 20th of April and there's a 4 hour lineup, like, what are you going to do? I mean, realistically, quite a lot of people just aren't going to bother. So I would say if it's possible to do it today, I would advise that.
I went out yesterday and I voted. And I'm wearing my gold maple right now for Canada Strong. There you go. Canada First, Canada Strong, whatever you want to call it. Um,
Yeah, those are the two different options, aren't they?
there you go. However you want to see it. The Liberals dropped their platform, their budget um, over the weekend. And here's some reaction from CBC on this platform they dropped. We're going to play this clip here. Can we go full screen with that, Nick?
The Liberal platform, frankly, that's something I will say that has been ready for several weeks now. Mona Fortier was the one who was working on this, and it was ready before Mark Carney even became Liberal leader. So, he only had to tweak a couple of things. The Liberal platform, frankly, that's something I will say that has been ready for several weeks now.
But I find that strange, Jim, because Mark Carney told me, and every other Canadian, in the debate, the English debate, that he's not Justin Trudeau. He's a very different person from Justin Trudeau, and he's in charge now.
Sounds like the machine had the platform ready and there wasn't a lot to do to it other than there's been talk out there that all they did was a find and replaced Carney's or Trudeau's name with Carney.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if Trudeau was still in charge, it would have been a bit different. But it's funny. I mean, one of the last things Trudeau did before he left was talk about that high-speed rail between Toronto and Quebec City, and Carney in the platform, or I mean the Liberals, let's say, they put that in there, but I haven't heard Carney mention that a single time. That's not something that he's gone around and selling to the electorate. So when I saw that, I thought, like, okay, so this really is an old platform, and Carney's just kind of the name at the top.
Yeah, a lot of the reaction from the finance people out there for sure has been just like, oh my God, that is like way bigger than the deficits that Trudeau was running. Like these are huge, but Carney defends it by saying they're not debts, they're investments. I mean, another fancy
Yeah,
word
and also
too.
he did the classic Trudeau Freeland promise of, yeah, the deficit's going to increase, guys. However, by 2028 or whatever it is, it'll
Mm-hmm.
be all cleaned up and nice and fresh. But it's always in the future, isn't it? I mean, how long have we been hearing? Like, we'll sort the deficit out in 4 years, and then 4 years later, the deficit's as high as ever, and they say, no, we'll sort it out in 4 years, guys. 4 more years.
Yeah, there's a lot of reaction from some of the financial publications saying that this is way more than people expected. There, because in the beginning, Mark Carney and the Liberals were talking about some fiscal responsibility, and that's been thrown out the window.
Yep. Well, that's never been his bag. Fiscal responsibility has never been, that's not the kind of economics that Mark Carney believes in. He's more of a Keynesian. His head would probably explode if somebody said that to him, and he'd probably deny it, I should say. But as I perceive it, he's more of a Keynesian, which is like, he's more about government spending to promote wealth. That's best that and he did say that during the debate. Very a fundamentally Keynesian perspective that he offered during the debate, where he spoke for about a minute or two about his economic values, and he said he believes that the government can pump money into certain companies and certain sectors of the economy, and that will then multiply many, many times over when private investors get interested in it and they start to then it can go off and live by itself as an independent sector or business. Like that's absolutely what he believes, and to do that, you have to spend quite a lot of money. So I mean, it's inevitable that I think anyway, it's inevitable that the deficit's going to balloon and the debt is going to balloon as well. And then simultaneously, sorry, we should say it's not quite just Keynesianism and it's not quite just public-private investment, but he also has completely promised the world really to the pensioners, to the people that no longer work, which is the biggest expense, not just for Canada, but for basically every economy in the world now. The biggest expense is pensions and benefits for the retired, older people. And he's not going to change that, nor is Poilievre, nor is anybody, because that voting bloc, the silver-haired voting bloc, is just way, way too powerful to ever challenge.
We did some coverage here at the local election here on the chamber held a panel to ask questions, and one of the questions that we got to ask Kent Mulgad from Kelowna now was the moderator, and he got to ask the question on Bill C-18, and he also asked it of the candidates when he interviewed them. We're going to play this small clip here on Bill C-18. Or maybe not. Any luck there, Nick? Anyway, as Nick, you keep trying to find it there, get it. Bill C-18, all the candidates said Bill C-18 needs to be repealed. And of course, they're going to say that during the election. That was the Liberal bill that was put into place. Maybe, Ian, you can kind of fill us in on Bill C-18 and where it stands.
I would say as well, I mean, it's one thing for the candidates to say that. It's another thing entirely for the leader to say it, and the leader of the Liberal Party and the NDP, and then the Bloc, if you want to talk about them, they've not said anything like that. They've not committed to that. So, I mean, candidates in the field there, they make a lot of promises that aren't honoured by the leaders. So I would keep an eye out for that. But C-18 in a nutshell it's the federal government, the Liberal Party, trying to raise revenue from Facebook and Google every time journalism is put on their platforms. They want to try and raise money from that. Facebook said
Let's
no,
just
thank
scrap
you,
that, Nick, for
and
now.
as a consequence, we are not able to post on Facebook, which is by far the most important platform out there, social media or otherwise, for putting news out there. So effectively, the Liberal Party started a fight that it couldn't win with Facebook, and rather than the Liberal Party losing, instead, independent media has lost.
And then Stephen Fuhr, the Liberal candidate here in Kelowna, had this to say about the carbon tax, and this has been going all around nationally, been shared. It talks about the carbon tax. Hopefully, Nick, we have this one.
Stephen, do you believe carbon taxes are an effective way to reduce emissions?
The experts say it is. Every expert on the planet has said it was the most cost-effective way to do this, and unfortunately, 38 or 39% of the Conservative Party made so much noise about this that it became unpalatable. And so, it doesn't mean that we're going to abandon it. It just means it's going to have to be applied in a different way. And
Stephen, do
Okay,
you
you can
believe
kill that there, Nick.
carbon taxes?
I think people, you got to go back there and watch that a few times. And Tracy Gray is kind of like moving around there. I thought Mark Carney took credit for that. I've seen Mark Carney take credit for scrapping the carbon tax so many times. But here, Stephen Fuhr said it was the Conservatives that did it.
Yeah, I think he was. He'll be kicking himself for that, I'm sure, because he was a little bit too plain speaking for politics these days, wasn't he? He said something that is almost everybody knows. Everybody who's interested in politics or involved in politics knows that everything that he said there is true, pretty much. But he just forgot. He forgot to put the truth through the politics lens to turn it into, political speak. So he got in trouble, as you say, gone all over the place, hasn't it? That
Yeah.
little statement. But I mean, the thing that I would point out there, which I think of as being, sorry, I said everything is true that he said. The one thing that I think isn't true, or at least should be scrutinized more, is when he said every expert in the world said that we've got to do this. It's kind of like, are we still doing that? Are we still trying to invoke the Greek gods of the expert class so that they can come and make more mistakes? We've lived, most of us anyway, except for little tiny babies, we've lived through too many years recently and observed on too many occasions when the so-called experts have got things not just a little bit wrong, but dramatically and dangerously wrong, time and time and time and time again. I just I don't think anybody's listening to that anymore. Don't think people are. I don't think anybody wants to hear that anymore. Don't think people want to be told the expert in climate change tax policy has said this. I mean, no, thank you. I'll listen to an expert on rocket science or something like that, something real, like actual hard science where it matters that you're an expert. I don't think I'm going to listen to somebody that calls themselves an expert on how to tax your way out of climate change, because I don't think you can really be an expert on that. You can just have an opinion on it.
Yeah, a couple of the political points being made by many people, including the media, is that one is that he's giving credit to the Conservatives when Mark Carney took credit for getting rid of the carbon tax. Two, that it's actually coming back. So,
Yeah,
that's
well,
been,
it's not gone, has it? Half of it hasn't gone. We
no.
keep, like,
But,
that's another thing. The consumer side is gone, so we're not going to see it on receipts and things like that. When we get billed, we're not going to see it anymore. But we will still see it if we go to a Walmart or something, try and buy something. We're still going to see it. It's just going to be hidden
hey,
inside of the price.
hey, Ian, nobody buys steel. Come on. When's the last time?
You buy
When's the
any
last?
steel lately?
When's the last time you bought steel? Come on. Everything in this world is made out of plastics. Oh, right, that's banned. You can't buy plastic either. So you can't buy steel. You can't buy plastic. So I think it's wood. Although
We'll just have to take advantage of our enormous monopoly on semiconductors that we have in Canada. What an economic expert said that recently, lest we forget.
an economic expert, you're bang on the money here. And I'm sure you know who God Sad is. Hopefully I pronounced his name wrong. Right? My mouth is not working today. He came out and said that you have to be losing your mind if you're going to vote for the same thing that put us here. 9 years of failure. And he's a pretty popular guy.
Yeah, he's a professor, isn't he?
He is a professor. Yeah, and he has a pretty stern warning for Canada. Anyway,
Do we have the clip?
we don't. We don't have the clip. We're
Yeah,
clipless
I mean,
today.
he's an interesting fellow, but he's been opposed to the Liberals for a long time now. He's very like pro free speech. he's very upset about what's happened in Montreal. I think he's from Montreal, so he's upset about immigration is another thing. But he's been on Joe Rogan a few times, and I think he might also be friends with Jordan Peterson. So he's certainly aligned in that way. But he is also quite a thoughtful fella, and he's Canadian, and he's very, very sort of successful and influential. We don't have many people like that. So he is still, for all that, he's obviously got a side, but he is still a very sort of important Canadian voice, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe he has Lebanese background. That's his
Yeah, because that's the kind of his shtick. He talks about how in terms of immigration, because he talks about how Lebanon changed, because he grew up in Lebanon when it was still majority Christian, I think. Lebanon is now majority is Islamic. There are more people that believe in Shia and Sunni Islam now than the Christians. And he saw that change. You hear a lot of people speak about this quite eloquently, how Lebanon kind of stumbled into this like civil war and ethnic strife and Islamism and all the rest of it. And his warning is, I see the very beginnings of that in Canada. So that's kind of a lot of how I think that's one of the main reasons that he became an influential voice, is because he started to talk about Lebanon like that.
And then this poll here shows kind of where the it kind of ties into that. The conservative voters are, like the vast majority are voting for a better tomorrow, for hope for a better tomorrow, where 20% of them are scared of Trump. And then that's kind of like flipped, almost like the mirror of it, opposite for the Liberal voters, where mostly voting on fear. And I think those two campaigns are basically wrong. One campaign, and I did an editorial on it, got some heat for it. One campaign is hope for a better tomorrow because it's focused on our youth. And the other campaign is basically focused on fear. And that one is focused on the older generation, my generation, that is very susceptible to fear. We've seen that during COVID. I mean, the people screaming the most were the people in my age category, and they were driven by fear.
Yeah, but I think you nailed it there, didn't you? You're talking about the demographic. This is, for me anyway, and I've followed quite a lot of elections in the US, UK, Canada, a few in like France and Europe. This election is the most obviously based on different age groups that I've ever seen. I've never seen an election that is so transparently based on how old you are, really. And it's like young people, as you say, more likely to be Tories or Tory voters, and older people more likely, like especially sort of boomers, like the people who are retired, more likely to be liberal. And that all the talking points on the liberal side, or many of the talking points, and even the references, the CBC had a joke about this, didn't they? They did that skit. Even the references are kind of like 20 or 30 years old, talking about old CBC shows and things like that, and old hockey players. It's kind of like everything seems to be coded based on the demographic that's being appealed to. And the Liberals they're going for the older generation, and they are succeeding wildly, aren't they? They're having excellent success in that regard. Whereas Pierre Poilievre is kind of saying, life sucks for young people here. You can't get a house. There's a lot of crime everywhere. You don't feel safe. We haven't invested in this economy, and it's lagging behind our rivals. And even conversations about like incomes. Poilievre talks a lot about how much people earn, their salaries. The Liberals not so much, because obviously if you're aiming at people on fixed incomes, pensions basically, you don't need to talk about salaries, do you? That's not really relevant to them. So I find it really interesting from a kind of political science perspective. I think this election, for many reasons, will be studied in the future, and I think that's one of them.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of flipped though too, because the conservatives used to be the older voters and the younger people would be Liberal or NDP. But that's completely flipped for some reason. And, like most of the policies are directed towards young people on the conservative side. Like most of like the promises are directed at young people for a better tomorrow. And then on the Liberal side, it's really about fear. I listened to Carney speak this morning at a rally, and man, he just ramped into Trump about, he's coming to get us. And it's, and it was, like just all about Trump. That's really all he talked about.
Yeah, because Trump is a huge disruptor. He's a massive disruptive force. And my contention is that the Liberal Party is basically the Conservative Party with a lowercase c. They're the ones that promise the least change. And they even promise maybe we can go back a little bit. We can turn back the clock a little bit. And we can kind of forget the Trudeauism and we can go back to 90s Canada, early 2000s Canada, Stephen Harper's Canada. We can go back and we can have that. And Trump is this great change maker. He's this agent of chaos, isn't he? And it's kind of like a Conservative Party would concentrate on that. Whereas the more radical party, which is what I consider the Tories to be this time around, they're promising fundamental change. They're promising economic and, to a much lesser extent, some certain social change. They're promising to implement policies that will create kind of a new country in a way, a new settlement. And yeah, the Liberals are the block on that. They're the Conservative Party. I find that
It's completely flipped. Yeah.
endlessly fascinating.
So they dropped a couple more platforms this morning. Pierre, again, emphasizes housing platform and promises to build 2.3 million homes. So that was the big promise from Pierre this morning. And he actually laid out how he's going to do it, too. And I think we talked about this in the past. And one of the big things is axing the GST on homes under. That's all new homes, whereas, like Carney's plan is just for first-time home buyers. And up to another $50,000 in savings for municipal taxes. So up to $100,000 for every new home. That will be huge. That will be rocket fuel for the housing market. The other one is very small. The Liberal plan is mainly geared towards corporations, that with $25 billion and plus $10 billion in easy financing for corporations and modular home builders, of which Brookfield Asset Management is a modular home builder. Imagine that. There you go. And then Carney also dropped a plan.
Controversial.
Yeah, Carney also dropped a plan. Well, we'll get back to Carney, what Carney dropped later. But Pierre also, the story here by Holly Jones and Blacklocks calls consulting fees insane. And he said one of the cuts he'll make is having the insane billions spent on federal consultants. It's just ridiculous what we've spent on consulting. Federal spending on government consultants,
as we've mentioned, because they don't seem to do anything. They don't seem to actually bring about positive change. $
25 billion a year on consulting. That's pretty good.
That's hard to believe, especially when you think that how much money was spent on the TMX. It was something like 40 billion, wasn't it? That's usually, or anyway, it's many billions. I can't remember the exact figure that they say, and it depends who makes the claim. But you never hear people talk about this, do they? They never hear people talk about the cost of consultants. They always talk about things like pipelines. And I mean, the TMX is now doing wonders for us, isn't it? It's like it's helping us enormously right now.
$25 billion a year in consulting. At the same time, the government grew its federal payrolls from 2016 from 195,000 to 254,000 employees. So bloating the government and spending just scads of money on consultants. $25 billion a year. I can't even get that number out of my head. Just think what you could do with $25 billion and add that to the $5 billion Brookfield paid its taxes. There's $30 billion right there.
Yep. I mean, you could pay down the debt, you could bring down the deficit, you could build infrastructure that earns hundreds of billions of dollars over its lifetime. You could do quite a lot.
One federal union, the Professional Institute of Public Service, said in a 2023 testimony at the Commons, spending on consultants has created a shadow public service, unaccountable to taxpayers. Unchecked spending on government outsourcing by various governments has created a shadow public service of consultants. And that was President Jennifer Carr. So who doesn't want that? Shadow government.
Yeah, why not? Why not? They do such good things for us.
Nick's flipping through the slides there. We're going to go back to there, Nick, to Brian Lilly's slide there. Another union has come out and endorsed Pierre Poilievre. He's getting a lot of unions. Again, this is flipped. It used to be unions would endorse the NDP or the Liberals, but we're seeing a number of unions coming out and supporting Pierre Poilievre. Completely flipped again.
And one in Quebec.
This is odd. This is completely odd because Carney is getting lots of movie stars or famous people that don't even live in Canada anymore endorsing him, where Pierre Poilievre is getting like the regular blue collar guy.
Just like south of the border, that's also happening there.
And then we do have a clip here. Hopefully we can play this. A former BC Premier coming out and endorsing Pierre Poilievre. Let's see if we can play this clip.
Together.
You don't, in your op-ed, Mr. Campbell, endorse Pierre Poilievre. You don't mention him at all, actually. But I would imagine that is your choice, is it? Why did you not mention him in your op-ed, or are you still thinking about where your support should go?
No, I'm not thinking about where my support should go. I think we should hold governments to account.
Yeah.
The Liberal decade was a dismal decade for Canada. Their immigration policies hurt every one of our cities. They made our housing problem worse. They made our healthcare problem worse. They made our educational problems worse. We have to hold governments to account. One person does not a government make. You know, I wouldn't count on the federal government delivering and executing a program anytime as long as it's the same group that's been there the last 10 years. They've been incompetent and they've led us down the wrong road. I'm not saying they weren't well-intended.
Yeah.
They just didn't do the job. They have to do the job, not just for me and my generation. We've been taken care of pretty well. But I'll tell you, my grandkids deserve to have a government that's thinking about them, not thinking about debt, not thinking about expediently taking care of this group or that group. How are we building the future for Canada? That's what I'm voting for, and I think that Mr. Poilievre has the platform that will get us there.
Former BC Premier.
There you go. And then Mark Carney did drop a piece this morning. He said, in America, healthcare is big business. In Canada, it's a right. And he said that his government will focus on modernizing healthcare. So it lives up to the promise. That means thousands and more doctors. I mean, that would be amazing, but we have not seen any results from that. We've done so many stories on people. Millions of Canadians can't even get a family doctor, and we've done stories on people dying in waiting rooms. And that
But also, who uses hospitals and doctors the most? Older people by a gigantic amount. There's no competition. Hospitals, in many ways, kind of exist for old people now. That's older people need care. That's going to happen to all of us. That's how it works. When you get older, that's when you need to be looked after the most. So obviously, that's a massive priority for the older generation or generations. And there's Mark Carney. On the same day that Poilievre's come out with houses, obviously, house prices, that's a concern of younger people. Whereas health is definitely for older people. And Gordon Campbell there also mentioned that. He also alluded to that. It's like everything is through the filter of, everything's being seen through the lens of age and kind of generations.
Another Holly Doan's Black Luck story. Justin Trudeau's promise to reduce poverty by 50% is yet another failure by the Trudeau Liberals. Approximately 1 million more Canadians are living below the poverty in 2022 compared to 2021, said a briefing binder. There you go. Results from the 2022 Canadian Income Survey show the overall poverty rate in Canada, as measured by Canada's official poverty line, was 9.9% in 2022, up from 7.4% in 2021. The increase in poverty rate reflects the end of pandemic-related income supports made available through 2021. There you go. Another promise.
Who knew that it wasn't possible to pass a piece of legislation called the Poverty Reduction Act in Parliament and end poverty? I mean,
that sounds exactly like the
baffles me. I thought that's all you had to do.
What was the Biden one? The Biden Inflation Reduction Act or something like that?
Inflation Reduction Act, yeah.
It actually stoked inflation. Like sometimes they do the opposite of what they say.
Yeah. Unfortunately, generally speaking, it is not possible to pass an act in Parliament and end something as abstract as poverty or whatever it might be. It takes a lot more work than a piece of legislation.
We're going to try and go through some of this stuff pretty quicker. Another Holly Doan Blacklock story here. Mark Carney says he's clear-eyed on China. He did identify it as the #1 threat to Canada in the debate there, the English debate. He says Canada must take steps to protect ourselves from China. Carney was asked to explain a remark in a televised election debate last Thursday when he named China as our biggest threat. China is very much partnered with Russia on so many things, and it is also the threat to Taiwan as well. But Carney, as chair of Brookfield Asset Management, as late as October 20th, attended confidential meetings with members of the Chinese Communist Party Central Committee to express strong confidence in developmental prospects and growth potential investing in China, according to the People's Government of Beijing. And now he said it's the number one threat.
he had an opportunity there to mention why it is that the Politburo of the Chinese Communist Party favors the Liberal Party in Canada over the Conservative Party or the NDP. He had an opportunity to address that, but he didn't. Instead, he just said that China's our number one enemy, and he hasn't, or number one threat, or whatever it is he said. He's not mentioned anything about that, really, has he? At any other point, but all of a sudden, now that he's being accused of being how do we say, friendly to China, let's say, or possibly reliant on Chinese loans, or Brookfield is, all of a sudden, because of all of that and all of the pressure that he's been under from Poilievre, now he comes out and says that China's a bad guy. But we didn't hear very much about that before, did we?
CSIS record showed that Trudeau, when he was prime minister, and his cabinet and political aides were warned 163 separate times of foreign interference over a 6-year period. The intelligence service in a February 21-23 memo told Trudeau that Chinese agents posed an existential threat to Canadian democracy. No action was taken.
Indeed. Well, that's the reality, isn't it? And then there's also India and Russia and other countries. Iran also gets involved. Yeah. But China, obviously, China's a different question because China is so powerful. China's so huge that, you know, it's a bit different then, isn't it?
And then I've been hearing rumblings from the Liberals saying that Poilievre hasn't dropped his platform. Apparently, it's dropping tomorrow. There you go. And they say that Carney dropped his on the weekend to kind of avoid scrutiny. It's getting scrutinized for sure because it's a wowzer, like in spending. So interesting to see what Poilievre drops tomorrow.
Yeah, definitely. It will actually. That will be interesting because he hasn't inherited a platform. It's going to be entirely of his own making, or his movement's making, if you want to call it that.
He can't use the find and replace key.
No, not this time. Unless he wants to put out Erin O'Toole's platform, but that didn't do good things for him. So.
No. And then the NDP, we don't talk about the NDP much because they don't make a lot of noise, but they just put out this is what they put out, not for sale. I'm not sure if they mean Canada not for sale or the NDP not for sale, because I would argue with that. A lot of people are saying the NDP has sold itself out because, I mean, it looks like it's going to get wiped out, and then many people are accusing Jagmeet Singh of doing it willingly.
Yeah, well, you said just now the NDP hasn't been making a lot of noise, but certainly the NDP's leader made a lot of noise in the English debate, didn't he? Every time that Pierre Poilievre had anything at all to say,
what I mean.
He was chirping non-stop, wasn't he?
Because it didn't make sense, because the people, where he's losing votes, he's losing it directly to the Liberals, yet he seemed to play right into it like it was just like he didn't recognize it, and he was actually trying to help, because he just overtalked, which blew me away that CBC didn't cut his mic or ask him to stop. Like, that was one of the most annoying things. It made the debate almost unwatchable. Because every time Pierre talked, he talked over him.
Well, the person that put an end to it on one occasion was Mark Carney, who seemed to like shake his head and say, no, when Poilievre was trying to say something. And he kind of like reined in Singh. But I for whatever reason, I don't know if this is a strategic decision. I don't know if they've thought about this, but the NDP is targeting the Conservatives, even though it's the Liberals that are taking away their voters.
It just makes no sense. Again, it makes no sense. You have here, if you look at it, the NDP used to be part of the working people. My dad was, like very active in the NDP. And he used to be part of it when I used to work at the mill, and we were always, working in the IWA and that. And then the Liberals were kind of that centrist party that were, about working class families and that. And then the Conservatives were supposedly about business. And it's completely flipped. You have a lot of the whatever the criticism, Jagmeet Singh, guy driving a Maserati, wearing a Rolex, and a lot of his, he just speaks nonsense. And then you have a self-described global elitist running the Liberal Party, and it's completely flipped. And you have a guy that came from nothing, that has some of the more hard luck stories, Pierre Poilievre, is the one representing the Conservative Party. It's this complete kind of like the old switcheroo, trading places or something.
And Poilievre's always talking about blue collar jobs, and he's always talking about natural resources development, which obviously requires a lot of blue collar jobs to make it happen, to make it work. Whereas Singh is dead set against that, and he does. Singh seems to be more interested in like attacking billionaires and that sort of thing, rather than trying to create blue collar jobs. It is an interesting.
That's what's funny about that, because here's Brookfield accused of dodging $5 billion in taxes, and here's his opportunity to go at him because the Blocs Blanchette went after Carney, but nothing from Jagmeet Singh really.
It is an interesting one. It seems like they need to do some soul searching after this election. They need to ask themselves why they exist. I think come up with a convincing answer.
And then this one's really concerning. The Fed report, another Holly Dome Blacklock story. A Fed report predicts collapse. The Privy Council in a report quietly released, again, they like to release these types of reports on Saturday, predicted that Canada in 15 years may be so dysfunctional that wage earners flee and the poor resort to illegal hunting for food. Many people in Canada assume following the rules and doing the right thing will lead to a better life. However, things are changing. Wealth inequality is rising, and that's what we've seen through COVID. A lot of these policies were directed at the very rich and the big corporations, and you see the same thing if you look at the Liberal platform. Most of, like in the housing, the money is directed to the corporations. Like there's $25 billion to modular home builders, which is, again, what Brookfield does. Another $10 billion to low-income housing, and very little directed at first home buyers because it's only first-time home buyers. And stats show that most first-time home buyers do not buy a brand new home. And this is where people lose it. One of the commenters is talking about it too, right? Most first-time home buyers do not buy brand new homes. They buy in the resale market for a couple of reasons. It's safer and easier because you don't have to wait for the home to be built, and a lot of people don't qualify for the mortgage and all that stuff. Their interest rates could change. So it's kind of a red herring. But if you look at it in the resale market, it allows people to upscale, like to move up. Like, so if you bought a condo and then you can move into a townhouse or a townhouse to a home, something like that, allows you to kind of move through the cycle. But they would look at it and say, oh, no, you're just helping investors. You're looking at it the wrong way. Look at all the money, the $35 billion going straight into corporations.
Absolutely. And, this report, it's not the first report of this kind that we've seen. There was that infamous one that came from the RCMP. It said much the same, really, didn't it, a couple of years ago? No. It's quite scary. It's quite scary that there are people whose job it is to look at things like this and predict the future, that they're coming out with like these sincerely held opinions that it's possible that Canada could degrade to the point where, there's social unrest and people are going hungry and whatnot.
You have to look to history, though. Like for the past 10 years, if you've had the wheel, literally been driving the car, and the wealth gap has gotten worse and worse and worse, and you look at the policies that were put into place, even during COVID, who did it benefit? The large corporations. Who got hurt? The small businesses. Look at the failure of small businesses. And it's just been that over and over and over. A lot of that easy money went to the large corporations, and a lot of the pain went to the small businesses. And it's just that gap gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Who does inflation help? Ask yourself that question. Who does inflation help? It helps the rich. Inflation is very good for the rich, very bad for the poor, or the middle class. It's horrible for the people in the middle class and the poor, inflation. Mark Carney himself said when he was the Bank of Canada government, inflation is good. It's definitely good for the gray hairs that have a home and all that stuff. It's absolutely amazing, isn't it? But not so good.
Yeah, and if you got stocks.
Yeah, not so good for the regular person that has to go buy groceries and pay their rent. Rosie Barton gets fact-checked by CBC. The fact-checker gets fact-checked by CBC. Did she come clean on it? Nope. Not so much, right? So that's that day when CBC was losing its mind because Rebel News got to the microphone first and they went off. And they even tried to tar all independent media outlets, including ourselves, as, spreaders of misinformation, when Rosie Barton herself was the one spreading the misinformation. But she will not read that correction on air, though. But CBC quietly made the correction, right? There you
And
go.
it's not like it's a little thing, is it? It's not like she said that Canada's population is 43 million or something when it's really 41.
No.
She made a massive error. She claimed that the remains of children have been found at residential schools. I mean, an astonishing claim to make. An
And she used that.
extremely incendiary claim. Very, very touchy subject, obviously. Really sensitive stuff. And she said bodies have been found. Bodies haven't been found. Radar has suggested that there might be graves, but there's nothing about bodies. Doesn't mean the same thing. A grave doesn't necessarily contain a body.
She used that to paint Rebel News as a spreader of misinformation. We've seen the same thing from Rosie Barton that during the trucker rally when she said early on, like before anything, without any kind of like information that supported that the money to support the truckers was coming from Russia, which was clearly not the case.
Yeah, I mean it's just a shame because like I saw I saw this straight away. We talked about this the day after she did this. I said, why is she talking about misinformation while spreading misinformation with her next breath? But this is like I just feel if anybody ever wonders, if there's anybody that's trapped in a world where they have never heard any serious criticism of the CBC, I would just say, have a look at this. Just look at this one incident where she set herself up as the moral arbiter, and she set herself up as the decider, what is true and what is false, what's a journalist and what isn't a journalist, or who is and who isn't. And while she was doing that, with the next breath, she uttered a dangerous falsehood, just an extraordinarily incendiary falsehood, misinformation, if you want to put it that way. That's why people are sick of the CBC. That's why people, not just the CBC, but these self-appointed sort of expert types, if you want to call her that, or these people that think that they have kind of unique access to the truth and to respectable opinions. They are very frequently wrong, just like Rosemary Barton, and that's why people are sick of this arrangement.
We're going to try to chunk through the rest of this really quickly. The markets, another Trump terrible tariff day. Markets still reacting. Supposedly deals are coming. We don't know if deals are coming, and that China's threatening if deals do come. So China is also a big player in the markets. China holds a lot of U.S. treasuries and holds a lot of stocks in. China is a big economic superpower for sure. So the markets are in turmoil, and those trade tariffs are causing a lot of that. So, but gold, China and Russia buying a lot of gold, and gold rocketing up the charts. Gold continues to move, and it's almost like, and I would say, in overbought territory right now. So these are kind of areas where it could be, like it's like kind of ripe for a bit of a correction, because you look at that chart, it's starting to go vertical there. And those are the kind of times when, the charts kind of like come back to earth a little bit. I'm just trying to pull up the most recent one. It's being stubborn here for some reason in Canadian dollars. Here we go. I think I got it now. In Canadian dollars, you want to take a guess? Take a stab at it?
Is it 5,100?
Not almost 47.26 in Canadian dollars versus 34.
Right. I always underplay the Canadian dollar, don't I? I've got a bias against it, apparently.
There you go. Gold, the rock star. Gold, the rock star. Bitcoin, we talked about it for a while now, that Bitcoin looked like it was going to start making its move back to that 100,000 mark. It looks like it's building some momentum to challenge there. Look at that, eh? There's our friend Bitcoin moving higher. And the Canadian dollar showing strength, or more like the American dollar showing weakness. All currencies kind of all currencies rising as the American dollar falls, basically under attack by the Chinese, you could even say, or under attack by his own hands, Donald Trump.
Definitely, though, the Chinese have, like you mentioned, they can really do damage to the US dollar. So can Japan and a lot of these other countries that Trump has started trade wars with.
Did that early on, because they are also a big holder of US treasuries. So is Canada. Canada has no gold reserves, because you look at that chart above there. Canada, 0 gold reserves, which sucks now. And most of our reserves are held in, yep, you guessed it, USD. There you go. There you go.
Smart thinking.
Someone should talk to the Bank of Canada governors for those faux pas.
They're
We got a little
experts,
bit
though,
on
don't
our.
forget.
We're almost through here. We got a little bit on our AI and tech stuff. Grok now takes on ChatGPT and wins on transparency. Cyber News calls it one of the best AI tools of 2025. So Grok 3, it's kind of fun. I've shown it to a few people. They've got a few different voices there that you can play with. And there's a new startup aims to replace all jobs with AI. It's called Mechanize. So they're announcing that Mechanize is to start focusing on virtual work environments, benchmarks, and training. There you go. So it's coming for your job. And guess what they're doing? Mechanize is hiring workers to build AI to get rid of you. There you go.
Wow.
Oh, what a fun world, eh? And here's a new tourist location in the United States, if you dare go down there. But Tesla's upcoming Hollywood diner and supercharger in our EV section. We don't have much here, so I don't know if we can play this clip or not, Nick. But they've got this huge kind of like supercharger area where it has a diner, kind of like an old Hollywood style diner. Is that clip playable, Nick? Or look at that. You can go in there, get charged, watch the big screen, and go in and have a burger and fries. There you go. That's good, Nick.
It's a lot of
There you go.
electricity.
And then this meme is all over the internet. We got 3 of them. If you get offended easy, don't look. Just turn it off. You'll be done. But if you get offended, again, this is our area. We have a little bit of fun. So if you like fun, here you go. This guy with his, they call it the double-barreled salute or something like that.
This is actually a very amusing meme, I think.
It's probably one of the best, eh? I don't know.
Just
Can you
because
blow
the
that one
guy
up,
is
Nick?
so happy, he's so overjoyed, isn't he, as he does the fingers.
I watched a lot of this. Some people are actually going out there and trolling like some of these events and that. And he's not the only guy. They seem to got the finger, like the double bell. In Kelowna, they call it. I don't get myself in trouble here. Like a certain part of town salute. But this is a double-barreled salute. This guy was just jacked up, and then they put him in a bunch of other memes and everything. So the real GDP per capita growth for the OECD, and there he is, Mr. Double Barrels there, and with Canada at the bottom there. Actually, we're being beat for the worst spot by Luxembourg, I believe.
Yeah, what the hell happened to Luxembourg? I don't know what's happened.
So Canada rising up in the charts because we were dead last. Now look at Luxembourg. Like now we can laugh at Luxembourg, eh?
Thank God somebody's a bigger loser than we are. But again, this is age-coded, isn't it? This is the whole premise of this meme is that the old have kind of they've had their cake, and now they can do what they want. They don't care about the future. That's kind of the implication there, isn't it?
There's a lot of talk out on the internet this guy has really inspired a lot of the youth to go out and vote now because they're just like, oh yeah, Grandpa.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like most political analysis, it's like it's way oversimplified, isn't it? But yeah, that's managed to now become embedded, I think, in a lot of people's minds that liberals equal boomers, Tories, younger generation.
And it's wild, and it's absolutely wild to me that that's the way it is because it used to be the opposite. It's just like, and it's
even
really
when Trudeau
funny.
got elected, it was the opposite, wasn't it?
Yeah, because it's really funny because like again, I got to introduce Jean Chrétien here at Level Up 2019, and he was my favorite political hero, and and I believed at that point I was a centrist and believed in a lot of this stuff, but like I mean that party is not even a sliver of what that party was back then. Even Jean Chrétien, when he made that speech announcing Mark Carney, he talked about pipelines and doing all this stuff, and you read the platform. Ain't no pipelines in that platform.
No, I would recommend anybody can see the PDF. I'd recommend you do it yourself. Control F pipeline, and the results are 0.
There you go. So there you go. The biggest asset Canada has when we look at our GDP, what is it? None other than oil and gas. And Justin Trudeau was asked to sell some of that oil and gas, LNG, to the Japanese. He said there was no business case for it. Was asked by the Germans for the same thing, and I believe the South Koreans said there's no business case and that we would sell them hydrogen instead. How are hydrogen sales going?
I think they're at about 0.
Well, there you go. I invested in a company called Ballard way back in the day. Ballard was a Canadian high flyer at one point. Ballard Energy it's like the big hydrogen, and you make hydrogen buses and all kinds of stuff, and it's, I think, on Vancouver and stuff like that. And you can tell a lot about a lot of things about where the stock charts are. So I think I bought in Ballard in $1, and I think I unloaded in the $6 range or something like that. And it, it went way higher. I mean, I bought it after its peak because it peaked once at $57 or something like that, or 50 in the 50s. But I bought it, like when it was recovering once, and I thought, the hydrogen story was a real thing. But right now, Ballard Energy is $1.49. There you go. Who would have thought? And then
I've just done a quick Google because I wondered if I was right, and I'll not like Rosemary Barton. I will actually say that I was wrong there. Canada has exported a few $100 million worth of hydrogen. So it's a few $100 million. So that must be, it's like a few days worth of oil exports or something like that.
Yeah, because like you and I talked about this many times. Alberta and Saskatchewan combined for energy is Canada's #1 for provinces. If you put those two provinces together for energy, but Alberta oil and gas is #1 of all industries, like far and away. There's not even a close second. So there you go.
Yeah, we would have so many crises if we lost that. We would have a currency crisis to start with, because that's the source. Those are our biggest exports. That's the source of our foreign currency. So, we would have
everybody
a
that
crisis
relies
like
on the
proper third world country.
And everybody that relies on the transfer payments from Alberta would do what? Get more subsidies from the federal government? I'm not sure where they would get it from. More debt, I suppose.
Maybe they would get it from the wind turbine profits.
There you go. I'll sell you some hydrogen.
From the supply management profits. Maybe that's where it'll come from.
Anyway, that's our show today. Sorry for the bumpy ride. We promised to be better tomorrow. And we got 7 days to this election. There you go. I have Dan Albus in tomorrow from the Conservative Party. I've reached out to, I had Juliette Sicot in here from the Liberal Party. I have reached out to Stephen Fear many times, and I get no response. So there you go. And none of the NDP want to talk either. It's like they don't even want to say anything. What's the deal with that? Hey? What's the deal with that?
Indeed. They don't even answer my emails, the NDP. They're AWOL.
Well, I don't know. They must. I wonder what is going on with Jagmeet and the NDP, because it doesn't look like they're trying to win any seats. That's for sure. Anyway, that's our show for today. We're back tomorrow, hopefully on time at 9 a.m. and with a lot less bumps. So thank you for watching Now Media.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.